Hi, I'm Nino Gonzalez, and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. Well, today I have the pleasure of having a guest, and we're going to be talking about pre-planning some needs in your life. And Lorena Murillo, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And your title is a family service counselor. And can you tell me what that your job entails?
Absolutely. My job is to sit down with families and talk about probably one of the hardest conversations they'll ever have, and that's pre-planning a funeral. Unfortunately, no one likes to think about it, but it's something that we all are going to have to do one of these days.
Right. Well, I know that, I've seen you, I saw you at one of the senior fairs here at El Paso Community College, and I just passed by there, and I saw a lot of people passing through there because they really don't want to see you and talk to you because they think that if they talk about death, something is going to happen. And they have this, me están echando la sal, or, you're going to create an omen for me and I'm going to die.
That's exactly true. I get that all the time. No, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk about it. But it's something that we have to talk about. I meet with families all the time, and they say, this is one of the hardest things we ever thought of, think of
Right.
doing. But after it's done, they feel relieved because the family members are not going to have to deal with having to come in at the time of need and make those decisions for them.
And I think sometimes I've talked about on the shows about wills and estate planning before, and I think one of the things is that it's a very touchy subject, and even if the family members bring it up to the parents or the grandparents, it's like, why are we talking about this, correct?
Exactly. And like you said, they think, oh, no, I don't want to talk about it because then I'm going to die.
Yes, or you already want my inheritance. Right?
Exactly, and it can cause a conflict. But, you have to be realistic because there's a lot of benefits to planning your funeral.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about planning and what it involves.
Well, what it involves is we get together, we talk about your desires, how you want to have your services. It's very important to know if you want to have a burial or a cremation. A lot of times family members don't know because you've never talked about it because it's not the thing that you do.
Sure.
And what happens is at the time of need, now the family's having to make that decision. They're distraught because they've just lost a loved one, and now they have to sit there and pick out a casket and pick out the flowers and pick out everything for the services.
Right.
So this really helps out with the families.
Yeah, especially during those emotional times, feelings can get hurt. I've seen a lot of arguments between family members, and sometimes a lot of relationships are ruined because during that time because they're arguing against each other about what to do.
Exactly. And one may have one belief, one daughter may have one belief, the other daughter may have another belief, and that's where the conflict starts.
Right.
So it's important to have it written down, to have this in writing, the plans that you want for your services. Do you want to have a cremation? Do you want to have a burial? Some people are against cremation, some people would prefer cremation. So the children, your family members need to know that.
Right. And so when, let's say we're going to sit down and talk about planning. So what are some of the things that you need to know other than, do I want to be buried? Do I want to be cremated? What are the specifics that we can go into?
Well, when you're pre-planning, you can decide on everything from the cards, your roses. Do you want music? Do you want it catered? Do you want certain people at your funeral?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Or do you want it to be private or public?
Correct, private or public. You can even put together your obituary for the newspaper. What do you want to be said about you?
Wow.
All that can be pre-planned ahead of time for the family.
And so with the families that you've worked with, and compared to the families that didn't have any planning, have you heard any comments from those that you've worked with, and whether it's been a benefit or not for them?
Absolutely. Just the other day I had a gal that came in for a funeral plan, and one of her dad did have a planned funeral, and one of her first questions was, did Dad pick out a casket? She says,
Right.
because I don't want to go through that. And he did, of course. He had the plan already. So he picked it out, and she says, thank God, because I don't want to sit here and have to look at a casket book.
Right.
Thinking that that's where Dad's going to be. And then again, I've also had people that come in with nothing, and they have to sit there and make these decisions, and they're distraught as it is, and then to have to pick out what casket you want to put your loved one in.
And not only that, there's financial consequences for this and financial decisions that have to be made.
Exactly.
And where do we get the money? How are we going to pay for it? So let's talk a little bit about that and why it's important to pre-plan.
Exactly. The average cost for a funeral service is an average $5,000 to $10,000.
That's right now in
Right now.
2016.
Correct. As time goes on, of course, inflation is going to kick in, and it's approximately 4.5% annually that it goes up.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
By pre-planning, you get to lock in your rates now.
So I get to lock in 2016 prices
Correct.
now,
Correct.
even though it might not happen until 10, 20.
Exactly.
Or whenever.
Exactly. There's people that have purchased their plans 1970s, 1960s, where they paid $1,000 for a funeral plan. They picked everything out. Right now, that same plan would cost you $8,000. Well, because they pre-planned it back then and paid their services, they get that $8,000 service now.
Wow.
Because they locked it in. Same thing if you purchase your plan now and you don't pass away for 20 or 30 years down the road, the family member, if you didn't have that plan, would have to pay a lot more at that time. Well, it's locked in, and all they have to do is pick up the phone, call the funeral home, and say, my loved one has passed, and the funeral home takes over. And
Because you already have the plan in place.
correct.
And so let's talk about. You said the average right now is about between 5 to 10
To
Arou-
10,000 for
around
an
that.
average
and,
funeral.
and it all depends, I guess, how elaborate you want to get, or
Exactly.
how simple you want to get. I guess
Exactly.
just like a wedding, correct?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's for the funeral service.
Okay.
Because then there's also the cemetery part of it.
So this does not cover the cemetery.
does not cover the
So
cemetery.
what if I want some plots at a cemetery? Would I have to go to that cemetery, the company itself, and get arranged for that? Correct.
Exactly,
Oh,
correct,
okay.
yes.
So this just involves the funeral.
Correct. Well, you can purchase both, but they are two different
Companies.
right. You have the services, and then you have the burial.
Right.
A lot of people forget that they buy the pre-plan service, but don't think of the burial, the plots that are going to be needed.
And so let's talk about these plans. So if I'm considering purchasing a plan, and whether I'm an individual or a family, are there both individual and family plans?
There's individual, because every plan is personalized to that person. Now, as far as the burial, you can get a family estate if you want, and you can get like a 4-plot or 6-plot.
Wow.
You can get mausoleums with more family members if you wanted. It all depends on what it is that
Is that very common here in El Paso? I don't see that as much.
Not
like
that-
in
not-
other cities.
There is family estates. Common, probably not real.
Not as common as probably as in other cities.
As correct.
Right.
But there are definitely family estates.
Yeah, because the more I see is I've seen, usually the spouses wanting to be buried together.
Correct. Yeah, and you can get the double crypts for
Right.
that.
But that would be a service that would have to be arranged through the company that owns the cemetery, correct? So let's get back into these type of plans, since it's personalized. So why do you say that I should lock in the prices right now instead of waiting several years down the road?
Because of the cost, because of inflation.
Okay, so how is that going to save me money? How much, for example, if I lock in today's prices, how can I pay it off? Like, over how many months do I have?
Well, once you
Or
lock
years.
once you pick out your plan, you can pay it off in 3, 5, or 10 years.
Okay.
You can set up a plan, but once you have that set dollar amount, it's not going to go up anymore. Once you're paid off the 10 years, you're done. It's not like some of the life insurances you pay until you pass away.
Correct.
This one is paid off the minute you're done paying off the balance of your
right.
policy.
And so can you give me an example, like just an average plan and what those payments would be?
Let's see. Um,
Yeah, an average
An average plan,
funeral.
okay, about $5,000. You're looking at about between $100 and $130 a month.
130, and that's over how many years?
5 years.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. A burial, 5-year plan for like a double crypt. You're approximately between $80 to $120.
And that includes the plots at the cemetery.
Correct.
So you're you know, if you're planning on buying the plots at the cemetery and then having the prearranged plan, you're thinking about maybe about a little bit over $200 a month.
Correct. 220 to 250 for both.
Okay.
And that's for your basic service.
Right. And that's not an elaborate
Correct.
plan. That's sort of an average that.
Yeah, correct.
That's
an
doable.
average plan. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And again, once it's paid off, you're done. It's paid. You're good to go.
Okay, and what happens that if, you know, I purchase this plan and I'm in a car accident and I pass away and I haven't finished paying it?
Depending on when you purchase the plan, it's either going to be paid off or the family member will pay off the difference.
Okay.
So it just depends on the contract at the time that is written out for you.
And these plans, are they specific to a certain type of company? So I know you work with one of the largest companies in the nation. So would my services have to be within one of your funeral homes?
Yes.
Yes. And what if I'm in a city where, probably not, but what if I'm in a city where that doesn't exist?
Well, that's one of the things you do have to think about. When you purchase your plan, you have to ask, is it transferable? If I decide to move to New York, can I take my plan
Right.
with me? And that's very important to know, because you don't want to buy a plan that if you're thinking of moving, that you can't take with you. So that it's very important. The company that I work for, yes, you can take it anywhere nationwide.
Because you have funeral homes nationwide,
Correct. That
But
is
what
correct.
what if I move to a rural location where probably you don't
The
have?
company will work it out for you.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So with your company, those plans are transferable.
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, we'll continue on the second half and talking more about pre-planning needs with Lorena on the second half of Making Sense. Thank you. Welcome back to the second half of Making Sense, and I am here with Lorena, who is a family service counselor, and we were talking about pre-planning needs and making sure we take everything that we want into consideration about what we want to have done once we pass away. I know it's a difficult subject, just like taxes, but those are two things that will always exist, death and taxes. But let's go into a little bit more of the specifics of these plans. So I really need to sit down and think, what is it that I want? Do I want a jazz band there? Do I want mariachis, correct?
Correct.
You said what size of obituary, because that'll also depend on the size, the cost, and the newspaper, correct?
Exactly. Little things like, well, the obituary, death certificates. When you pass away, families need death certificates for the bank, for your insurance, for a bunch of different legal matters. They're going to need death certificates. So how many death certificates do you think, based on the assets that you have, that your family member is going to need? We can include
I never
that
really
into
thought
the
about
plan.
that, because those have to be paid for, correct?
Correct, and we can include it, and we will actually order the death certificates for the family members and then give them whatever you
And
order.
also including, for example, do we want to have a limousine come and pick us up and police escorts? All of those have to be considered, right?
Correct, and we can include that into the plan. The catering, Do we want it catered? Do you want the services in a church? Do you want the services at the funeral home?
Okay.
Those are all things that we can include.
Wow. So I think that the best thing is once you want to buy one of these plans is to really think it through carefully and see what is it that you want. But what if I already did a plan and I'm already paying for it and I decide I don't want this anymore? I don't want a specific thing in that plan. What can be done?
You can actually, depending on how you set that contract up, because if you set it up as an irrevocable one, then we cannot change it because
Right.
you made that decision when you signed the contract originally. You can add to it if you wanted to, but as long as it's not irrevocable, we can actually, you can write it out and we can add it into the contract, put it in your file so that at time of need, the funeral director can make the arrangements needed.
So if there's a service I didn't want, but then the family member, we forgot to purchase another service, maybe those funds can be applied or credited to?
Correct, and that's based on the funeral director, the funeral home that you're working with, but 9 times out of 10 they'll work with you on that.
Okay, and also another consideration is the clergy that you want there because they also have to be compensated, correct?
Correct, depending on the service or the services that you're asking
Right.
for. Yes, we can include that into the plan as well.
Wow, so many things to consider.
Remembrance books, blankets, pictures, frames, picture frames. If you have 3 granddaughters and you want 3 granddaughters to have a picture of you and themselves, we can include that. We
Right.
can include the little blankets for them with your picture on
Or
it.
sometimes depending on the religion, the crucifix, correct?
The crucifix, Bibles, just depends on.
On what is it that you want.
Correct.
Okay, and so do you help them, like for example, if I don't know what I want, would you help me in trying to determine, what is basically the basics that I need?
Absolutely, and that's my job, to sit down and show you all the options and help you to decide based on your lifestyle, based on your preferences. We can put the whole plan together.
Okay, and would you, when you're doing this, and let's say that you're married, would you rather that it be you talk to both parties?
Absolutely, because one may have one thought and the other another thought that they don't agree upon. Well, they each need to know what each one wants. The husband may not want to be cremated where the wife does, but she has to respect his decision. So it's better to have both sitting down
Right.
together and making these decisions together,
Okay.
because they both get to hear what the other one wants.
Right, and what happens if the parties get divorced? And I know it's individualized plans.
Correct. Well, as far as the services go, they're individualized, so they
Right.
each keep their plan. But as far as the plot goes, and then during the divorce, they have to decide who's going to keep it, or if they want to be buried together. There's actually people that'll want to be buried together.
They still want to be buried together. Okay.
That's a friendly divorce.
All right, and so let's talk a little bit about veterans, okay? And so let's say that we have a veteran. Do they need any of these type of plans?
Absolutely.
Why? Because isn't it all covered for?
No, not exactly. The veterans actually need to find out exactly what is covered, because it doesn't cover all of their services. It covers a portion of the service, and it's a small portion.
Okay.
A lot of the veterans do believe that their whole service is covered, and it's a misconception.
So what is covered usually under veterans? Usually the plot?
Usually the plot is covered, and if I'm not mistaken, a small portion of the services.
They're given like an allowance.
Exactly.
Right, but not enough.
Exactly. So they need to do their research, because it does not cover everything. So then the families will end up having to cover the difference.
Wow, I thought everything was covered for if you were a veteran.
Yeah, no, unfortunately it's not. I thought so too, but no, it's not.
And let's talk about, for example, you were mentioning about there was a travel rider that you can add on there.
Exactly. There's a travel rider that can be added to your policy that covers you if you're a person that travels. If you are over 75 miles away from your home and you pass away, you go to China, you go to Hawaii, and God forbid you have an accident
Right.
there, that plan will bring you back at no additional charge.
So it'll cover everything that is needed, including
you
the
back.
paperwork to bring that body back.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's very important for someone that travels.
Yes, and that, of course, as you're adding on more to the to your plan, of course, the cost goes up. Does it go up dramatically, or is it?
No,
No?
no, it's not. It's not a lot. You can have, say, for example, for $10,000, you can have a pretty decent service.
Right.
So it just depends on how elaborate we want to go.
Right. And with, a lot of people now are preferring cremation. And so with cremation, how does that work?
Well, with the cremation, it depends on what you want. You can have the cremains put into a niche at the funeral. At the burial grounds. You can have it put underground like a regular burial.
Oh, really?
You can.
Wow.
Just depends on what you want, and that's why it's important to pre-plan so that the family knows, do you want your cremains scattered?
So if I'm going to get cremated and I want it to be at a cemetery, I still have to purchase either a plot or a space for my remains to be put in, correct?
Correct.
But what if I wanted to go to a family member?
That's fine too.
That's fine?
That's
Would
fine.
there be a cost for that, or the
No.
cost of the urn, or?
The cost of the urn, which is usually included in the plan.
Okay.
When you get a plan for cremation, we include an urn in the plan.
And then I guess the desires have to be mentioned. What is the family going to do with those ashes? Are they going to be kept?
Exactly.
A lot of, I've heard, especially in movies, you see that they spread the ashes everywhere or whatever. But does that happen? Really?
It does. Oh,
It
yeah,
does?
absolutely. A lot of
Okay.
people will say, spread my ashes either on my ranch or in the ocean or in the mountains or wherever they were, wherever
Now
they
you know
lived to
how
be.
we've all gotten so legalistic here in the U.S. Are there environmental laws regarding spreading
I'm
of
sure there
ashes
is. I'm sure
depending
there
on
is.
the community?
I'm sure there is, because I don't think they would want you to go spread the ashes at the city park.
Okay.
So,
So I guess you got to check on the local ordinances
Absolutely.
or maybe federal ordinances, or state ordinances regarding the spreading of the ashes.
Exactly.
Correct. But what if I have life insurance? Okay. So I bought life insurance, and wouldn't this be enough to cover?
it would, definitely. Life insurance is great to have, and I recommend if you don't have it, definitely get some life insurance. The problem is that you never know how we're going to pass away. Okay, is the loved one going to be ill? Are they going to accumulate medical bills? Is the spouse going to be left with a huge debt
Right.
after the person passes away? And that's what insurance should be for.
Or are there still
your life
minor
insurance.
children left?
Exactly. Do you need to support the family still? That's what the life insurance should be focused on, used for mainly. So a lot of people say, they have life insurance. I don't need burial.
Sure.
But you're not giving your family peace of mind. They're going to have to come in and make those decisions. The other thing is, how long will it be before you have your life insurance paid out?
Right.
You have to give them a death certificate, and then there's a process with it. In the meantime, are you going to leave your loved one in the refrigerator
Yeah, that's true.
waiting for the services because you don't have the funds?
Right.
The person has to have their ceremony, so either you have the cash up front or you have to wait or borrow it.
Right. And it was funny that you mentioned that, but when I had an attorney come by and we were talking about wills and estates, and we also talked about dying without a will, and we don't know what can happen. And for example, we had Sherman Hensley, who was they were fighting and trying to see who whether he had a brother or not, and the body remained refrigerated.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's horrible. I mean, because it doesn't bring closure and it doesn't bring peace of mind.
Right, and not to mention the stress of just having lost a loved one,
Right.
and the financial stress that comes with it too. But as far as the life insurance, yes, it's great, but you should think that it's for their future.
Right. And many of us, we don't even know how much life insurance to get, because if I have a $10,000 policy, that's not going to be enough. That's barely, and depending when I pass away, it's not going to be enough to cover the cost.
Exactly, that's the other thing. You may have a life insurance, but what if you don't pass away for 20 years?
Right.
And by then, a funeral costs $15,000.
And not only
anyway.
that, if you have term life insurance, that ends at a certain age,
Exactly.
and so if you pass away after the term life ends, then
Exactly.
well, interesting. And you brought a slide here that showing how over the past 50 years the cost of funeral arrangements have risen, and back in interesting figure back in 1960, I think you have here a figure of $708, correct?
Correct.
And back in 1985, it was approximately about 2,737, and 2012, 7,045, and now about how much? Close to 10,000?
Yeah.
Wow. And so
For everything.
we can lock in those prices right
Exactly.
now. Okay, anything else that you would like to add that we must be aware of in prearranging our needs?
Age as well.
Okay.
Well, I mean, depending on the plans and health, you want to take those things into consideration. Of course, the younger you are, the easier, the longer that you're going to have to pay it is.
But if you start planning too young, don't you think that situations change? The family might grow or things like that. I know there's probably not a perfect age to start planning, but
No, I actually talked to a guy the other day who planned his at the age of 25, and that was a great thing because some of these plans, or our plans, will cover your children and grandchildren up to the age of 21.
what do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more about
if
that.
you put together a plan,
Right.
say for $7,000, you have everything that you put on that plan will cover your children and your grandchildren up to the age of 21.
And so what does
With
that
our
mean?
plans.
If my child were to pass away?
Yes, your
They-
child
and even
will
though
have.
my child didn't have a prepaid plan,
That's
but because
correct.
I had one?
Because you have one, everything that you put on your plan will be given to your child or grandchild under the age of 21, and you'll still keep your plan.
And I still get to
And you
keep
still get to
wow.
keep the
So, and does that cost extra, or is that just
No,
that's part of the
that's
agreement?
part of our agreement. Mhm.
Wow, that's wonderful to hear. I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, we never think of our children or grandchildren, or we don't want to think of them passing, but accidents do happen. And if it did happen, and you have a policy with one of our locations, it would cover them.
Right, and so once we get into planning, and that's a wonderful benefit that something tragic like that were to happen, that they would be covered. And does it only cover one child, or what if there's two
It'll
children
cover all
involved?
your children and grandchildren.
Wow. My goodness. Well, this has been real important information. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day and coming us and telling us about pre-planning. I know that sometimes we see you at expos or conferences and people just pass by your table, but I think it's an important topic that we need to discuss, and we need to have that topic discussed with our family, and right now when everything is calm, there's no emotions, and hopefully there's no fighting. But thank you very much, Lorena, and we'll put
Thank
your
you.
information in case people want to contact you.
Awesome.
And thank you very much for coming by.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you next time on another episode of Making Sense. Thank you, and have a great day.